Few understand this parable. Jesus was speaking to you. Have you ever stopped to think why some stories cross millennia and continue impacting lives today? It's not by chance. It's because they touch wounds that every human being carries. Pains we try to hide, truths we need to hear but are afraid to face. And here is a truth that goes against everything you've been taught. It is not the sinners who are furthest from God. Often it is precisely those who think they reclose the righteous ones, those who never sinned publicly. Shocking. It should be, because this parable you're about to dive into was untold to make you feel comfortable. It was told to turn your world upside down. God saw your pain, whether you're the son who left home and destroyed everything, or the son who stayed and became bitter inside. And here is the good news many do want you to know. You do not need to keep living as a slave when you were born to be a son. When God speaks to the heart, He's not interested in your religious resume or your list of sins. He wants relationship. He wants intimacy. He wants all of you, not an edited and socially acceptable version of who you are. The parable of the prodigal son is probably the most well-known story Jesus told, but also the most misinterpreted. Most people think it's about a rebellious boy who left home, spent everything, and came back repentant. The end. Moral of the story: don't be rebellious. But if you think that's all, you've completely missed the point. This story has layers of depth that will make you question everything you believe about forgiveness, about deserving, about justice, about God's character. You are not alone. God is with you. But the truth is, many people are alone not because God moved away, but because they built walls of pride, empty religiosity, hurt disguised as justice. And these walls are harder to tear down than any scandalous sin. When everything seemed lost in your life, did you run home or stay outside, angry at those who managed to get in? This story will force you to answer questions you've been avoiding, will put you before a mirror that reflects not what you appear to be, but who you really are deep in your heart. And here's the promise that will keep you reading to the end. If you allow this parable to truly penetrate your heart, you'll discover something few understand. You'll learn that God acts in the silence of your worst moments, that tears God sees have more value than memorized prayers, that heaven is silent but God is acting right now. As you read these words, you'll understand why Jesus told this specific story to specific people at a specific time, and you'll realize He's telling it again, now, directly to you. God heard your prayer, the one you didn't even have the courage to fully verbalize. The one that got stuck in your throat because you thought you didn't deserve to be heard. And the answer will surprise you, will deconstruct you, will rebuild you. It's faith in Jesus. Christ isn't about following religious rules or keeping up appearances. It's about understanding that you are deeply loved before doing anything to deserve that love. And if that sounds too radical, too good to be true, it's because it probably is. But keep reading, because in the next few minutes you'll discover that this good news isn't a fairy tale. It's the most powerful and transformative reality that exists. The request for inheritance. There's a moment in life when we think we know everything, that we don't need anyone, not even those who have always been there, caring, protecting, loving. That's when independence becomes rebellion and the heart closes to advice that could spare us so much pain. The younger son in the story didn't just ask for his inheritance, he declared, without words, that he preferred the money to his father's presence. Imagine what goes through a father's heart when he hears something like that. When God speaks to the heart, it's often precisely to warn us about paths that seem bright but hide abysses. We look at the world out there and think, that's where freedom is. That's where real life is. But is freedom really doing what we want without measuring consequences? How many times have we made impulsive decisions thinking we were conquering our independence, when actually we were just distancing ourselves from what really mattered? This young man wasn't just asking for money, he was rejecting a relationship, protection, unconditional love. The thing is, at that time, asking for inheritance while the father was still alive was equivalent to wishing for his death. It was like saying, "Father, I don't need you anymore. I want what's mine, and I want it now." Think about the coldness of that, the insensitivity that blinds us when we're focused only on our own desires. Today, we see this happening in different ways, but equally painful. Children who abandon elderly parents in nursing homes and disappear. People who cut family ties over material goods. People who choose having over being, possessing over belonging. And you know what's most impressive about this story? The father didn't stop the son from leaving. He could have refused, could have used his authority, but he didn't. God sustained me in moments when I could have lost everything, but he never took away my freedom of choice. Even when our decisions are bad, he respects our free will, because true love doesn't imprison, it liberates, even when it hurts. The father divided the property between the sons and let the younger one go, carrying with him not just the money, but also the consequences of his choices. What this young man did and know yet, and what we so often ignore, is that there is a huge difference between freedom and libertinism. True freedom is being able to choose good, having autonomy to build something solid. To love without chains, but with responsibility. Libertinism is this false sensation that we can do whatever we want without being accountable to anyone, without considering that each of our actions generates effects not only on us, but on everyone around us. How many people do you know who left everything, family, values, principles, in search of happiness that seemed to be out there, only to discover later they were chasing illusions? It's like that employee who leaves a stable job where they're valued to chase a wild proposal that promises the world, but in the end is just empty talk. Or like that person who abandons a solid relationship because they met someone more interesting, only to realize later they traded gold for bronze. You are not alone. God is with you even when you make wrong choices. He doesn't abandon you, but also doesn't prevent you from learning the hard way, if that's what you choose. Now, think about the father's perspective for a moment. He watched his son leave with a broken heart, but without chains. Didn't run after him, didn't send messages asking him to come back. Didn't keep calling every day saying, "Son, you're making a mistake." He simply let him go. This wasn't indifference, it was love in its purest and most painful form. It's the kind of love God has for each of us that gives us freedom even to distance ourselves from Him, because He knows that one day when the dust settles and the illusion fades, we'll look back and understand we were running from precisely what we needed most. God heard your prayer in that moment when you cried out in the desert of your own choices, even if it took you a while to realize it. He was there, waiting, not with judgment, but with open arms. The father in the story knew the son needed to go through that experience, however painful it was. Sometimes life needs to teach us what words cannot. Sometimes we need to get hurt to value those who have always been willing to heal us. And you know what happens when we finally understand this? When we realize we threw away what was most valuable in exchange for crumbs. Then comes the weight, the shame, the suffocating regret. But also comes something deeper, the awareness that there was always a way back, an open door, a waiting heart. The son left thinking he was conquering the world, but actually he was losing himself. And this happened silently, gradually. We do wake up one day and decide to destroy our own life. We make small choices apparently harmless that distance us from what's essential. A little lie here, a betrayal of values there, a compromise over there. When we see it, we're so far from home, we don't even recognize who we were anymore. But here's a powerful truth. No matter how far you've gone, no matter how much you've wasted, the way back always exists. Faith in Jesus Christ is this: taking the first step even without knowing exactly what you'll find. Trusting that love is greater than error, that mercy is stronger than judgment. And this is just the first part of a story that will show you how true this is. The dissolute life, the freedom the son so desired, was finally in his hands. Along with a fortune he hadn't built, but inherited. And then the party started. Imagine the scene: a young man with money in his pocket, no one to answer to, in a distant land where no one knew him. It's the perfect scenario for someone who wants to live without limits, without rules, without consequences, or at least that's what we think at first. He spent everything on parties, drinks, momentary pleasures, surrounded by people who appeared out of nowhere when the money appeared to, those folks who are only close when you have something to offer. Well, he discovered he had many friends while the money lasted. When God speaks to the heart before we make hasty decisions, it's precisely to spare us this kind of disillusionment. But we don't always listen, right? We prefer to learn in practice, feel it on our skin, to later understand the warnings made perfect sense. The son was living what he thought was the peak of life, but actually he was digging his own ruin, coin by coin, party by party. What stands out here is the speed with which everything collapsed. It didn't take years, it was a matter of time until the money ran out. It's impressive how we can destroy in months what others took years to build. Think about how many real stories you've seen like this. People who won the lottery and within a few years were poorer than before. Athletes who earned millions and ended up bankrupt because they spent without thinking about tomorrow. Businessmen who inherited prosperous businesses and sank everything through lack of wisdom and excess arrogance. The dissolute life isn't just about spending money, it's about wasting time, health, relationships, opportunities. It's living as if there were no tomorrow without realizing tomorrow always comes, and when it comes, it brings the bill to pay. God saw your pain when you were at the bottom of the pit of your own choices. But often we only realize this after we've already lost everything. The son was so immersed in illusion, he didn't even notice when things started to fall apart. Now comes the part the parable doesn't detail, but we can perfectly imagine how did he feel in those days. At first, he was probably euphoric, thinking he'd made the right choice, that he'd escaped a monotonous life to really live. But deep down, in moments of silence, when the music stopped and the friends left, didn't he feel emptiness? That sensation that something was wrong, that all of it was too superficial to be real. The thing is, pleasure without purpose always leaves a bitter taste. You can fill life with distractions, but you can't fill the heart with meaning. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. When everything seemed lost, it wasn't just because of external circumstances. It was because inside he was already lost long ago. The hunger that was coming wouldn't just be for food, but for meaning, for belonging, for true love. You are not alone. God is with you even in moments when you purposely distance yourself from Him, even when you pretend you don't need anything beyond what the world offers. And then hunger arrived. Not just his, but of the whole region. A great crisis hit that distant land, and suddenly resources that seemed infinite dried up. The friends vanished like smoke. The doors that were open closed. No one wanted to know about him anymore. No one answered when he asked for help. It's funny or tragic how we discover who really cares about us precisely in moments of need. When you have something to offer, everyone shows up. When you need something, almost no one stays. The son learned the worst way possible that popularity isn't the same as friendship. That being surrounded by people isn't the same as having someone. God acts in the silence of these crises, preparing the ground so we finally see what really matters. Sometimes He allows us to lose everything to discover what should never have been lost: our sense of identity, our values, our connection with what is eternal and true. Physical hunger was just the reflection of a spiritual hunger that had existed for some time. Now, imagine desperation taking over. The money ran out, friends disappeared, food became scarce, and pride was still there, preventing him from going home. Because admitting error hurts, right? recognizing we were wrong, that we threw everything away for nothing, that we disappointed those who loved us most. This cuts deeper than hunger in the stomach. But the moment was coming when he'd have no more choice. The time was coming to face reality, to look in the mirror and see no longer the confident young man who left, but a broken, desperate man with nothing but his own shame. And it's precisely in these moments, when we're at rock bottom, that the greatest transformations begin to happen. Tears that God sees aren't signs of weakness, but of awakening. Each tear that falls in the desert of our bad choices is a seed of restart, an indication that there's still hope, that not everything is lost. And the son was about to discover that rock bottom can be the beginning of a climb back home. Humiliation and repentance. When we think we've lost everything, life has a way of showing us we can still go down one more step. The son who once left home with full pockets and a head full of dreams was now in the worst possible situation for a Jew of that time, taking care of pigs. It wasn't just any humiliating job, it was the humiliating job. Pigs were considered unclean, filthy animals, forbidden even to be touched according to Jewish law. And there he was, in the mud, feeding those animals, watching them eat while his own stomach growled with hunger. The irony is cruel, isn't it? He who had wasted a fortune on banquets now looked with desire at pig food. God saw your pain in that pigsty, in that humiliation he himself had created with his choices. But you know what's interesting? Sometimes we need to reach this point of total brokenness to finally wake up, to finally see the truth that was there all along, but pride wouldn't let us see it. Physical hunger was unbearable, but there was something even more painful gnawing inside, the awareness of what he had become. He left home as the son of a rich and respected man, and now he was there in the lowest position he could imagine. Wanting to eat carob, those dry pods that not even the pigs wanted much. No one gave him anything. The same people who partied with him when he had money now passed by him as if he were invisible, when everything seemed lost. It wasn't just a matter of bad circumstances. It was the devastating realization that he had thrown away his dignity, his identity, his inheritance for absolutely nothing. Have you ever felt this? That moment when you look at your life and think, how did I get here? How did I let things get to this point? It's a painful but necessary awakening. It's the kind of pain that doesn't kill. It transforms if we let it. And it was right there at rock bottom, surrounded by pigs and the smell of his own defeat, that something changed inside him. The Bible says he came to his senses. This is one of the most powerful phrases in the parable. Came to his senses. It means that until that moment he was out of his senses, living a lie, anesthetized by illusion, blinded by arrogance. But now, with an empty stomach and a shattered heart, clarity finally arrived. He remembered his father's house. Not a vague memory, but vivid, detailed. He remembered that even his father's servants had bread in abundance while he was there dying of hunger. You are not alone. God is with you even when you feel in the most distant, dirtiest, most unworthy place. It was in that moment of total humiliation that God began to work in that boy's heart, showing there was still a way, still hope, still a house waiting for him. God acts in the silence of our deepest crises, preparing the ground for a return we didn't even imagine was possible. True, genuine repentance isn't just feeling sorry for yourself, it's recognizing the error, taking responsibility, and deciding to change direction. And that's exactly what happened. He didn't stay there lamenting indefinitely. He made a plan. I will arise and go to my father, he said to himself. Look at this beautiful thing. Even in the worst situation, he still had the capacity to rise. We always do. No matter how deep you've fallen, you can still get up. The son mentally rehearsed what he would say. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. He wasn't trying to return as a son because he knew he didn't deserve it. He was willing to be just a servant, just someone with a roof and food. When God speaks to the heart in moments like this, he's not demanding, he's inviting. He's saying, come back. No matter what you did, no matter how much you wasted, just come back. Heaven is silent, but God is acting, preparing something much bigger than we can imagine in our smallness. So he got up. This is the crucial part. Many people have moments of clarity, realize they're on the wrong path, recognize their own errors, but don't get up. They stay there, trapped in the paralysis of repentance without action, in guilt without movement. The son didn't do this. He got up, shook off the mud, gathered what courage remained, and started walking. We don't know how many days he walked. We don't know if it rained, if it was cold, if he slept on the road. What we know is that he put one foot in front of the other, and each step was a step away from destruction and toward redemption. Faith in Jesus Christ is this: taking the first step even without knowing exactly what you'll find. Trusting that love is greater than error, that mercy is stronger than judgment. Every kilometer he traveled was proof that true repentance isn't just feeling, it's decision. It's movement, it's transformation in action. And while he walked, something extraordinary was happening on the other side of the road. Something he didn't even imagine, something that would change everything. The return and reception, while the son walked toward home, mentally rehearsing his apology speech, preparing for the rejection he thought he deserved, something completely unexpected was happening. The father was watching. Not occasionally, but constantly. Every day, at some point, he looked at the road, waiting, anticipating, believing that one day he would see that son's silhouette approaching. And when he finally saw, still from afar, very far, his heart raced. He didn't need to get close to recognize Father knows Son, even after so long, even with appearance changed by misery. God heard your prayer long before you opened your mouth, long before you had courage to return. He was waiting, looking, anticipating your return since the first day you left. And what did the father do when he saw the son? He ran, an older man, respected patriarch of an important family, ran. This was humiliating in that era's culture. Men of that position didn't run. But true love doesn't care about protocol, doesn't care what people will say, doesn't care about its own dignity when what's at stake is the beloved son. Imagine the scene. The son came slowly, staggering, dirty, head down, prepared for humiliation. Suddenly, he hears hurried footsteps. He raises his eyes and sees the father running toward him. In that moment, everything he had prepared to say began to crumble. Not because he forgot, but because reality was being completely different from what he had imagined. He expected coldness, distance, perhaps a just reprimand. But what he received was a hug. Not a polite, formal hug, but a desperate, tight hug, wet with tears. The father kissed him. Kissed that dirty face, that son who smelled like a pigsty, who had wasted half the family fortune. Tears that God sees aren't just ours, they also tears of joy from a father who receives back a son who was lost. God sustained me in all the moments when I moved away, and when I returned, He didn't charge me, didn't humiliate me, didn't make me pay. He hugged me. That's how God's love works. It's not based on merit, it's based on relationship. The son tried to start his speech. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But before he could finish, before he could ask to be treated as a servant, the father interrupted, not with words of reprimand, but with orders to the servants. "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet." Each item had deep meaning. The best robe wasn't just any garment, it was the robe of honor, of dignity, reserved for special occasions. The ring was a symbol of authority, that he was still a son, still had rights in the house. The sandals distinguished a free man from a slave, who walked barefoot. The father wasn't just receiving the son back, he was restoring his identity, his position, his dignity. When God speaks to the heart saying, "You are my son," it's not a conditional declaration. It doesn't come with asterisks and fine print. It's an affirmation of identity that no error of yours can erase. You are not alone. God is with you, and when you return, He doesn't receive you as a visitor. He restores you as a son. But the restoration didn't stop there. The father ordered, "Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate." A fattened calf wasn't just any animal. It was reserved for the most important, most special occasions. Sacrificing that animal meant inviting the whole community, making a memorable banquet, a celebration no one would forget. And why? Because the son who was dead came back to life. The one who was lost was found. Not just came back home simply, came back to life. This changes everything. The father didn't see that return as a humiliating defeat of the son, but as a resurrection. God saw your pain when you were lost, but His joy when you return is indescribable, is disproportionate to what would be normal or fair. That's how grace works. It doesn't make mathematical sense. It's not logical. It's not fair in the human sense of the word. It's excessive, exaggerated, overflowing. When everything seemed lost, when you thought there was no way back, that you had gone too far, that you had done too much, God was preparing a party for your return. The house that was before in silence, marked by absence and the pain of departure, now exploded in music, dance, and joy. Neighbors began to arrive, food was prepared, music began to play, and at the center of it all was the son, still trying to process what was happening. He had left a pigsty in the morning and now was at the center of a party at night. Had woken up wanting pig food and now was at a banquet. Had started the day as a beggar and ended as a prince. This wasn't gradual. It was immediate. It was complete. It was radical. Heaven is silent, but God is acting, and when He acts, things don't improve little by little. They transform completely. Faith in Jesus Christ is believing that no matter where you're coming from, no matter how far you went, no matter how much you lost, a single step toward the Father changes everything. A single moment of true repentance releases a heavenly celebration. And this party, this joy, this complete restoration, all of this was just beginning. But not everyone in the house was happy about it. The older brother's reaction, the party was at its peak. Music echoed through the property. People laughed, danced, celebrated. But there was someone who wasn't inside, someone who should have been at the center of the celebrations, but who chose to stay outside. The older brother was returning from the field after another day of hard work, faithful, fulfilling his obligations as he always did. When he approached the house and heard the music, the noise of the party, he was confused. He called one of the servants and asked what was happening. The answer must have fallen like a bomb. Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. Safe and sound. Those words should have brought relief, joy, gratitude. But they brought anger, an anger that had been accumulating for years, a silent bitterness that finally found a reason to explode. God saw your pain, older brother, but you were so busy trying to earn the love that was already yours that you did unnoticed. You are not alone. God is with you, but you isolated yourself in your own righteousness, in your list of merits, in your accounting of who deserves more. He became so angry that he refused to enter. Think about this. His own brother, whom he probably thought was dead, had returned alive, and he couldn't rejoice. He was so trapped in his own perspective, so focused on what he thought was fair, that he completely lost the ability to celebrate. The father, noticing his absence, went out to talk to him. Again, the father went out, just as he ran to meet the younger son. Now he went out to get the older one. Because a father loves both. A father cares about both. A father wants both inside the house, participating in the joy. But the older brother began to pour out everything he had been keeping. "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." When God speaks to the heart, sometimes it's to show us we're serving with the wrong attitude, that we're doing the right things for the wrong reasons. The older brother was in the house, but his heart was as far away as the younger brother's had been. Pay attention to the words he used. "I've been slaving." He was in the Father's house, but felt like a slave. Had access to everything, but enjoyed nothing. Fulfilled obligations, but didn't live relationship. Did everything right, but the heart was empty. And this is more common than we imagine. How many people do you know who have been in church for years but have no joy, who fulfill all the rituals but don't experience intimacy with God, who pride themselves on never having done wrong things, but also never experienced transforming grace? The older brother represents all those who try to earn by merit what can only be received by grace. He thought he deserved more because he had done more. He kept a mental spreadsheet of his good deeds, hoping that one day the Father would recognize and reward it. God sustained me not because of what I did, but despite what I didn't do. It's not about deserving. It never was. Tears that God sees aren't just of spectacular repentance, but also of silent pride that keeps us trapped outside the party. And then came the most revealing part of his explosion. "But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." First, he didn't say, "my brother." He said, "this son of yours," as if cutting ties, rejecting kinship. Second, he added details the parable hadn't mentioned before. The prostitutes. Did he really know, or was he assuming the worst? He was probably projecting, imagining the worst scenarios to justify his anger. That's what we do when resentment takes over. We magnify others' sins and minimize our own. The younger brother had wasted money, it's true, but the older brother was wasting something even more precious: relationship, joy, love, communion. He was physically present, but emotionally absent. When everything seemed lost for the younger one, he went and came back transformed. But the older one, who never left, was more lost than ever, just inside the house. Heaven is silent, but God is acting, trying to reach not only those far away in rebellion, but also those far away in religiosity. The Father responded with a tenderness that should have broken the older son's heart, but probably didn't, because a heart hardened by self-righteousness is one of the hardest to soften. "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." Look at that powerful response. The father didn't deny the older son's effort, didn't minimize his faithfulness, but he showed he had access to everything, always had. The problem wasn't that the father gave little. The problem was the son never asked, never enjoyed, never understood he was living as a slave when actually he was an heir. "Everything I have is yours." This included the fattened calf. He could have thrown a party at any time, but he chose to live in mental scarcity, in poverty of spirit, even having access to all the Father's wealth. You are not alone. God is with you, and everything He has is at your disposal. But you need to understand you're a son, not a slave. Faith in Jesus Christ is believing you're loved not for what you do, but for who you are. And then the Father concluded, "But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found." We had to celebrate. It wasn't optional, it wasn't excessive, it was necessary, it was right, it was correct. And the parable ends without telling us if the older brother entered the party or continued outside, because that choice is ours. The father's explanation, the father's response to the older son wasn't a defense, but a revelation. He wasn't trying to justify himself, but trying to open the eyes of that son who was so close physically, but so distant emotionally. "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." These words carry a depth we need to stop and digest. The Father was saying, "You were never forgotten, never less loved, never left aside. The problem is, Andet, I gave you little. The problem is you never understood how much you already had. God heard your prayer, older son, but you were so busy complaining about what you didn't have that you did unnotice you had access to everything. The inheritance was yours. The house was yours. The love was yours. But you lived as a stranger in your own house, as a servant, when actually you were an heir." When God speaks to the heart, often it's not to give us new things, but to make us see what we already have and aren't enjoying. The father didn't deny the older son's pain, didn't minimize the years of hard work, faithfulness, constant presence. But he was trying to show something crucial. Relationship is not transaction. Love is not salary. You don't accumulate points with God to later exchange for blessings. That's not how it works. The older brother had transformed the relationship with the father into a business relationship. I do. You pay me. I serve. You reward me. And when the reward he thought he deserved was given to someone who did undeserve it, he felt robbed, betrayed, wronged. But here's the truth that hurts and liberates at the same time. If we were receiving only what we deserve, none of us would have anything. God sustained me not because I deserved it, but because He is good. The party wasn't made because the younger son deserved it, but because the Father is love. And when we understand this, when this truth really penetrates the heart, everything changes. Tears that God sees are also tears of older sons who finally understand they didn't need to prove anything, that they were always loved, that they always had access to everything. But we had to celebrate and be glad. The key word here is had to. It wasn't an arbitrary choice. It wasn't the Father's whim. It was necessary. It was appropriate. It was the only possible response before a resurrection. Because that's what had happened. A resurrection. The son who was dead came back to life. And when life returns where there was death, when hope emerges where there was despair, when love triumphs over distance and error, celebrating isn't optional, it's mandatory. It's the only response that makes sense. You are not alone. God is with you. And when you return, when you rise, when you start over, all heaven celebrates. Not because you're perfect, but because you are lost and were found. When everything seemed lost, when the story seemed to have reached its end, God was writing a new chapter. And this chapter deserves to be celebrated, needs to be recognized, must be marked with joy. The father's explanation also revealed something about how he saw both sons. This brother of yours, he emphasized. Not that boy, not that wastrel, but your brother. The father was trying to restore not only his relationship with the younger son, but the relationship between the brothers. He wanted the complete family united, celebrating together. Because true restoration isn't only vertical between us and God, it's also horizontal between us and others. The father didn't just want one son back. He wanted both sons inside the house together in communion. Faith in Jesus Christ isn't a solitary journey where each person settles accounts with God, and it's a family being restored, it's community being rebuilt, it's love spreading and connecting hearts that were separated by hurt, pride, self-righteousness. Heaven is silent, but God is acting not only in the life of those who return, but also in the life of those who never left, but need to learn to celebrate, to forgive, to rejoice with others' restoration. And then comes the parable's silence. Jesus doesn't tell us what happened next. We don't know if the older brother entered the party or stayed outside. We don't know if he embraced his brother or kept his distance. We don't know if he finally understood the father's heart or remained in his bitterness. And you know why Jesus left this ending open? Because the answer depends on each of us. The parable didn't end 2,000 years ago. It continues happening today. Now, in your life and mine, each of us is somewhere in this story. Maybe you're the younger son, who is far away, who wasted much pose, who is at rock bottom and needs to remember there's a way back. Maybe you're the older brother, who is doing everything right, but with the wrong heart, who needs to learn to celebrate instead of calculating, to love instead of judging. Or maybe you need to see a bit of both in yourself, because all of us at different times distance ourselves in different ways. God saw your pain in both situations, and He is waiting with open arms for both types of sons. The question that remains in the air, echoing through the centuries, is, what will you do with this invitation? Conclusion. So, after everything you've read, everything that's been revealed, all the layers of this ancient story that have been peeled back before you, one question remains that only you can answer. What will you do now? Because knowledge without application is just accumulated information, dead weight that transforms nothing. You saw the two sons, recognized pieces of yourself in both, understood the heart of the father who never gave up on either of them. But understanding isn't enough. You need to move. You need to make a decision. Are you far away? God sustained me while you were distant, and He continues to wait for your return. Not tomorrow, not when you get your act together or fix yourself, but now, just as you are. Are you near but bitter? When God speaks to the heart, sometimes He's asking you to let go of resentment, to celebrate instead of calculating, to love instead of judging. The door to the party is open, the music is playing. The question is, will you enter or will you stay outside, counting your merits while losing joy? Think about it. How many times have you heard this story and let it slip away like water? How many times have you been touched for a few seconds and then returned to the same routine, the same patterns, the same complaints? God saw your pain, but He also sees your resistance to change. He sees when you prefer the comfort zone of bitterness to the vulnerability of forgiveness. He sees when you choose the silent rebellion of religiosity over the genuine surrender of a relationship. And even seeing all this, He remains there, waiting, calling, inviting. You are not alone. God is with you, but you need to stop acting as if you are. You need to stop living like an orphan when you are a child. You need to stop begging for crumbs when you have the right to the banquet. When everything seemed lost, that's precisely when the greatest transformation began to happen. So tell me, are you going to wait until you hit rock bottom, the pigsty, total misery to wake up? Or will you have the humility to recognize now that you need a fresh start, a redirection, a restoration? Now comes the practical part, the part that separates those who merely consume content from those who transform lives. First, identify where you are in this story. Be brutally honest with yourself. Are you the child who needs to go home? Then get up now, even if you're ashamed, even if you're afraid, even if you think you don't deserve it. Write a prayer, even if it's clumsy, even if it's just, "Father, I was wrong. Help me." God heard your prayer before you even finished formulating it. Are you the older sibling? Then make a list of the people you need to forgive, the grudges you need to let go of, the celebrations you missed because you were too busy feeling wronged. And then deliberately choose to celebrate. Call someone you've been avoiding. Forgive those you swore you'd never forgive. Join the party, even if it hurts your pride. Second, share this truth. When God acts in the silence of your life and you experience this restoration, you have